Welcome everyone to this episode of the Liver and Guts podcast. I'm Dr. Kash Gupta, gastroenterologist and hepatologist in the UK. And today I wanted to talk about alcohol-free beverages and do they actually help you cut down? So if you walk into any pub in the UK or the USA, you'll notice that things have changed a bit since a decade, 5-10 years ago. And sitting alongside the traditional lagers and ales are rows of alcohol-free alternatives, beers, wines, and spirits that promise the taste with none of the intoxication or hangover. And the market has really exploded with regards to these drinks. Sales of non-alcoholic beer have grown by about 9% globally in 2024, while the broader beer market has actually contracted. In the United States alone, the category has made up more than 20% year to date in 2025. But here's the question that researchers, public health experts, and clinicians are grappling with. Do these drinks actually help people drink less alcohol? Are they a genuine tool for harm reduction or something more complicated? And today we're going to have a look at the science behind what the industry calls no-low drinks or no-low beverages, which is short for no alcohol and low alcohol. So we'll explore what the evidence actually shows about who uses these drinks, why they use them, and whether they deliver their promise. So before we go any further, let's establish some definitions. When researchers talk about alcohol-free beverages, they typically mean drinks containing less than 0.5% alcohol by volume, or abbreviated as ABV. That's the threshold in most markets, and low alcohol products generally fall between 0.5 and 1.2%, though the definitions might vary by country. For context, a standard lager sits around 4 to 5%, and so these alternatives contain a fraction of the alcohol found in regular drinks. So to understand where the no-low drinks fit in our broader relationship with beverages, we need to step back and look at the full picture. A comprehensive review published in the journal Medicina in 2020 examined the health effects of major non-alcoholic beverage categories. Everything from soft drinks and energy drinks to coffee, tea, and the emerging category of functional beverages like kombucha, those trendy new drinks. So the findings reinforce something that nutrition researchers have known for a while, and not all drinks are created equal. And when it comes to health, sugar-sweetened soft drinks show strong associations with higher total energy intake, weight gain, obesity, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. There's a particular phenomenon at play here that's worth understanding. When we consume calories in liquid form, our bodies tend to under-register them compared to solid forms. So you might feel satisfied after eating an apple, but drinking the equivalent calories in apple juice doesn't trigger the same satiety signals, so you don't feel as full up. This makes liquid calories particularly insidious when it comes to weight management. And the research is especially concerning for young people. Heavy soft drink consumption in children and adolescents links not only to high obesity rates, but also to lower bone mineral densities, adding skeletal concerns on top of the metabolic ones. And this matters because the beverage habits formed in youth often persist into adulthood. So what about artificially sweetened alternatives? The evidence suggests that they're preferable to sugar-laden options for calorie reduction, but they're not equivalent to water. The long-term metabolic and appetite effects remain uncertain. So that's quite interesting, and some researchers suggest that non-caloric sweeteners might actually increase cravings for sweet foods or disrupt the gut microbiome. But that data is not conclusive. There's some research to suggest that if you get your calories, if you take sweeteners then you can feel like you want to get the sugar from other types of foods. And there's a suggestion that, although not conclusive, that it can disrupt the microbiome. And those signals from a disrupted microbiome can trigger hunger signals. So you can feel more hungry from it. Sports and energy drinks occupy their own category. They can genuinely benefit athletic performance and recovery in specific contexts. Think about the marathon runners or professional athletes training at high intensity. But for the average person heading to the gym 3 times a week, these drinks mainly just add sugars and stimulants with limited benefit beyond what plain water provides. Now, let's talk about the newer entrants to the beverage market: kombucha, flavored sparkling waters, soft seltzers. These products often carry health halos, marketed with terms like probiotic, antioxidant rich, or gut friendly. And kombucha deserves particular attention here because its popularity has surged quite dramatically. It's a fermented tea beverage made using what's called SCOBY, that stands for symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. The fermentation process produces various organic acids, polyphenols, and small amounts of alcohol, typically under 0.5%. The claim benefits are extensive: immune system support, cardiovascular protection, antimicrobial effects, even anti-cancer properties. However, when researchers conduct systematic reviews of the actual human evidence, as opposed to test tube studies or animal models, they find remarkably little to support these claims. A 2018 systematic review found only a single study examining kombucha's health benefits in human subjects. More recent reviews have identified a handful more, but the evidence remains preliminary at best. Some studies suggest modest improvements in gastrointestinal symptoms and potentially better blood sugar responses after high glycemic meals, but these findings need replication in larger, longer trials. The takeaway from this broader landscape is that water remains at the top of what researchers call the beverage hierarchy, followed by unsweetened tea and coffee, then low-fat milk. High-sugar beverages sit at the bottom and should be occasional treats rather than daily staples. And critically, healthy marketing on non-alcoholic beverages is not a guarantee of benefit. What actually drives health outcomes is sugar content, energy density, and serving size, regardless of what the label claims. So let's shift focus now to the alcohol-free and low-alcohol category specifically. A major systematic review published in the Food Quality and Preference in 2024 examined 60 studies spanning from 1990 to 2023, trying to understand what drives consumption of these products. The researchers used what they call product individual environment framework, which essentially means looking at the characteristics of the drinks themselves, the people who consume them, and the settings in which consumption occurs. Starting with the product factors, things like taste, mouthfeel, and branding emerged as decisive. This might seem obvious, but it has important historical context. Early alcohol-free beers launched decades ago failed largely because they simply didn't taste good. The brewing technology wasn't sophisticated enough to remove the alcohol whilst preserving flavor. Modern products have dramatically improved. So using advanced de-alcoholization techniques like vacuum distillation and reverse osmosis that preserve the hop character and complex aromatics that make beer enjoyable, this technology leap explains much of the recent market growth. Interestingly, how these products are labeled affects consumer psychology in unexpected ways. Research shows that labeling a drink as low or light can actually reduce its emotional appeal, even when the taste is identical to a fuller strength version. There's also evidence that low strength labels might increase the volume consumed. People apparently think they can drink more since each serving contains less alcohol. This represents a potential paradox for harm reduction. So when it comes to individual factors, meaning why specific people choose these drinks. Motivations are diverse. Health concerns rank high, along with weight control and the practical need to drive. There's also what researchers describe as the desire to drink more with fewer effects, essentially wanting to participate in social drinking for longer without becoming intoxicated. Taste and previous positive experience prove critical for continued use. So someone who tries an alcohol-free beer once and finds it disappointing is unlikely to return. The demographic patterns are revealing. NOLO use tends to be more common among younger adults, health-conscious groups, and perhaps surprisingly existing drinkers, including some with hazardous drinking patterns. And that's certainly what I see in practice. Women appear prominently in studies of low alcohol wine, and survey data from the Beer Institute found that 61% of Gen Z and millennial consumers say they would choose an alcohol-free version of their favorite beer if available. Wellness motivation topped the list, with 49% citing health as their primary reason for moderating alcohol. So generations coming up are drinking less alcohol, which is good news. The environment in which these drinks are available has transformed rapidly. So most UK pubs now offer NOLO options. Specialised alcohol-free shops have emerged in major cities. Grocery stores have expanded shelf space, with some reporting 40 or more distinct alcohol-free beer options. Athletic Brewing Company, which didn't exist before 2018, now commands 17% of the US non-alcoholic beer market, more than established giants like Bud Zero or Heineken Zero. The company was valued at roughly $800 million in the last funding round. But here's a critical caveat for the research. Most studies in this area come from the global north, use quantitative methods, and lack strong theoretical frameworks. We know much less about NOLO consumption in developing economies, and qualitative research that explores the nuanced social meanings of these drinks remains quite sparse. So we've arrived at perhaps the most important question now in this discussion. Do alcohol-free drinks actually reduce alcohol consumption, or do they simply add to it? This is what health researchers call the substitution question, and the evidence is more complicated than either industry advocates or critics might suggest. A study over 4,000 Dutch university students published in Drug and Alcohol Review in 2024 provides some illuminating data. The students had a mean age of about 23, and roughly 70% were female. Around 43% have never consumed alcohol-free drinks, while only 10% had never consumed alcohol. So this asymmetry immediately tells us something. Alcohol remains far more mainstream than its alternatives, even among younger, presumably more health-conscious populations. And among students who drank alcohol, the average intake on a typical drinking day was around 3.7 standard drinks. And here's where it gets interesting. Students who had never tried alcohol-free drinks actually reported consuming more alcohol drinks per occasion than those who had experimented with alcohol-free options. That correlation doesn't prove causation, but it's suggestive. And the critical finding concerns patterns among students who consume both types of beverages. Roughly 55% reported using alcohol-free drinks in addition to alcohol, not instead of it. So only about 17% reported deliberate substitution, meaning they consciously replaced alcohol drinks with alcohol-free alternatives. The remainder fell somewhere in between. So who substitutes? Well, the students who did report genuine substitution had distinct characteristics. They tended to be older, more often living independently or with a partner, and more commonly in steady relationships. And they sound like a more mature bunch. This profile suggests a more intentional, lifestyle-driven approach to reducing alcohol intake. It implies that substitution might be more about life stage and deliberate health choices than simply having alcohol-free options. Gender differences existed, but were modest. Men drank more alcohol per occasion than women. consistent with broader patterns, but differences in alcohol-free consumption volumes and usage patterns were relatively small. So the main takeaway for students' populations is sobering in a different sense. Alcohol-free products mainly add options rather than displace the alcohol. So they rarely translate into large reductions in alcohol exposure on their own. What are the kind of population trends? So moving from student populations to broader trends, a significant study published in BMJ Public Health in early 2025 examined how the use of alcohol-free and low-alcohol drinks as a reduction strategy has changed in Great Britain between 2020 and 2024. The researchers surveyed around 9,400 adults who scored 5 or above on something called the Audit C score, which is what we use in hospital to test for alcohol dependence. Let me just explain what that means. So Audit C is a shortened version of the Alcohol Use Disorders Identification Test developed by the World Health Organization. It consists of 3 questions about drinking frequency, typical quantity binge drinking occasions. Scores range from 0 to 12, and a score of 5 or more indicates that clinicians call risky or hazardous drinking. Patterns that may not constitute alcohol use disorder, but do carry elevated health risks. And this screening tool helps identify who might benefit from reducing the alcohol intake before serious problems develop. Among these higher risk drinkers who had attempted to reduce their alcohol in the past year, use of alcohol-free and low-alcohol drinks as a reduction tool increased substantially between 20 and 24. For serious permanent cut-down attempts, the proportion reporting use of these products rose from about 35 to 44%. For any cut-down attempt, use increased from 26 to nearly 39%. And these are meaningful shifts in behavior over just 4 years. So that's quite positive. So what are the demographic patterns in reduction? So these patterns reveal some important disparities. So older adults aged 65 and above started with lower use of these products, the no-low drinks, but showed the steepest increase over the study period, gradually converging towards younger age groups. Women and people in more advantaged social grades, researchers use the term AB to describe professional and managerial occupations, they consistently reported higher use. So those in the least advantaged social grades showed the lowest prevalence. So if you were less advantaged, you didn't really take up the no-low drinks. And this socioeconomic gradient matters for public health. If alcohol-free alternatives primarily benefit more affluent groups, they could widen rather than narrow health inequalities. The products tend to carry premium prices, often comparable to or exceeding their alcoholic counterparts, which might explain some of it. So if they're expensive, people aren't going to buy them. They end up using the cheaper beers. So a crucial finding from this research, despite rising use of no-low drinks, reliance on evidence-based support for alcohol reduction, meaning behavioral interventions or medications like naltrexone remain low throughout the study period. So naltrexone is a drug that we use for alcohol dependence. And what did change is that fewer people were attempting to cut down with no support at all. No-low products appear to be filling a gap for self-help approaches, but they're not replacing professional support where it might be needed. What about men, alcohol and non-alcoholic beer? So a thought-provoking paper published in the American Journal of Men's Health in 2025 takes a specifically gendered look at non-alcoholic beer, abbreviated as NAB in the research literature. The authors examined NAB at the intersection of men's drinking cultures, health risks, and alcohol industry strategy. It's a perspective that deserves attention given the stark gender disparities in alcohol-related harm. So the baseline facts are sobering. So alcohol is a major driver of premature health and death and disability in men, contributing to injuries, liver disease, violence, and suicide. And we see a lot of that in the hospital. Men consistently show higher rates of heavy drinking, alcohol use disorder, and alcohol-related mortality than women. Yeah, most of the patients that we have that are really sick in hospital, they're more men than women. Cultural expectations around masculinity often normalize or even celebrate heavy drinking, making moderation a harder sell in male social circles. I think this is particularly true in the UK. And against this backdrop, non-alcoholic beer has grown rapidly and now dominates the alcohol-free category in many markets, outpacing alcohol-free wines and spirits. So the growth has been driven by improved taste, those technological advances we just talked about earlier, wider variety, marketing that increasingly frames non-alcoholic beer as a healthy alternative or responsible choice in men. And professional athletes and fitness influencers endorse these products, positioning them as compatible with active lifestyles. And we also see, I've seen actors like, I think, Tom Holland promoting alcohol-free beers on a background of him having an alcohol problem in the past. So what are the commercial concerns and alibi marketing, as it's been termed? Researchers raise important commercial and policy concerns. So tax and pricing structures often create near parity between non-alcoholic beer and regular beer. So in many jurisdictions, alcohol-free products are exempt from excise duties, but still subject to standard sales tax. The price difference at checkout can be minimal, which might seem consumer-friendly, but also reduces the financial incentive to choose the alcohol-free option. More controversial is the concept of alibi marketing or surrogate marketing. This refers to the practice where non-alcoholic products carry identical or near identical branding to their alcoholic counterparts. Think of Heineken Zero advertisement featuring the same green color scheme, Red Star logo and font as regular Heineken. The concern is that these advertisements extend alcohol brand visibility into settings where alcohol promotion is restricted at workplaces, sporting venues, broadcasts in countries with alcohol, advertising bans, and contexts involving young people. So the term alibi captures the essence. The alcohol-free product provides an excuse to keep the brand visible. Evidence from France, which has strong alcohol advertising restrictions under what's called the Loi Evine, shows how this plays out. During rugby's Six Nations tournament, Heineken rebranded as the H Cup with all the familiar visual elements intact. Reachers found an average 1.2 alcohol brand references per minute during matches, mostly through slogans, visual cues, rather than explicit brand names. And there's also concern about normalizing beer consumption in more locations and more vulnerable groups. If people see non-alcoholic beer being consumed at workplaces, gyms, or during daytime activities, it may subtly reinforce the cultural centrality of beer. So for individuals in recovery from alcohol, exposure to these familiar cues, the look, the smell, the taste of beer may trigger cravings. And studies have found that people with alcohol addiction show psychological and physiological responses similar to actual alcohol consumption when drinking alcohol-free beers, including increased heart rate and sweating. So, it may help to serve those cravings for regular alcohol. So where does all this evidence lead us? The picture that emerges is neither a wholesale endorsement nor a blanket condemnation of alcohol-free and low-alcohol beverages. Like most things in public health, the answer depends on context, population, and goals. On the positive side, these products offer genuine potential for harm reduction when they actually substitute alcohol drinks. For someone who typically has 3 beers after work and swaps one for an alcohol-free version, that's a meaningful reduction in alcohol exposure. The improved taste of modern products makes this substitution more sustainable than it was in the past. The normalization of non-alcoholic options in social settings can also reduce peer pressure to drink alcohol, making it easier to moderate without feeling excluded. The population data suggests that products are becoming mainstream tools for people trying to cut down, and the shift from no support to using no-low products represents progress of a kind. People are actively trying to something rather than relying solely on willpower. And I keep saying this, I think willpower is overrated. You need systems in place to be able to prevent your harmful environment. The products are particularly popular among older adults and more advantaged groups, but usage is spreading amongst the other demographics as well. But there are some caveats. So the Dutch student data shows the most young people who consume both alcoholic and alcohol-free drinks use them additively rather than substitution. So if no-low products expand the total number of beverage occasions rather than replacing existing ones, the net health impact might be neutral or even negative if it reinforces drinking culture. The labeling effects are also worth considering. Low strength designations might paradoxically increase total consumption. People feel like they can drink more because it's low strength. For individuals with alcohol use disorder or in recovery, these products present real risks. The sensory similarities to alcohol can trigger cravings and physiological responses. The availability of familiar brands in alcohol-free form doesn't address the underlying social, psychological, and environmental factors that drive problem drinking. Substituting products while remaining in the same context, social networks that supported heavy drinking is unlikely to produce lasting change. The commercial dimension deserves ongoing scrutiny. So major alcohol producers have invested heavily in no-low categories, and their primary fiduciary duty is to shareholders, not public health. So if alcohol-free products serve mainly to maintain brand engagement and expand total beverage occasions, their health benefits may be offset by their role in substituting alcohol-centric consumer culture. So the alibi marketing concern is legitimate, I think. When an industry facing increasing regulation and health scrutiny finds a new pathway to visibility, you have to be a bit skeptical. So finally, the evidence base, while growing, remains limited. We lack long-term studies tracking actual health outcomes with no-low users. We don't have robust randomized controlled trials comparing different reduction strategies. And that would be good to see. The socioeconomic gradient and usage raises equity concerns that haven't been adequately addressed. Much of the research comes from high-income countries, leaving us uncertain about applicability elsewhere. So what are the conclusions and takeaways? So as we wrap up, let me just take away some practical points from this kind of body of research, things that I take away. For individuals considering using alcohol-free or low alcohol products to reduce their drinking, these products can work as part of a broader strategy, but they're unlikely to be sufficient on their own. And I certainly talk to, when I see people that are waiting for a liver transplant, we don't tell them that it's going to be a panacea by just going on the alcohol-free beverages. If you're making a deliberate, intentional choice to substitute, actively replacing alcoholic drinks rather than just adding options, and you're doing so in conjunction with other changes to your environment, which is important, and habits, the evidence suggests you have a reasonable chance of success. But simply adding no-low options to your repertoire without changing underlying patterns probably won't move the needle much. If you have a history of alcohol use disorder or are in recovery, approach these products with caution. The familiar sensory cues can be triggering, and the evidence suggests they're not an adequate substitute for genuine sobriety. Consider non-alcoholic related alternatives like sparkling water, fruit juices, mocktails that don't mimic the specific alcohol drinks, rather than products designed to taste exactly like the thing you're trying to avoid. It does feel like it's just a small step away from going back to alcohol. For clinicians and health professionals, we generally are aware that no-low products are increasingly popular among patients, particularly those in higher socioeconomic brackets and older age groups. Products can be a useful tool in harm reduction conversations, but they don't replace evidence-based interventions where appropriate. The Audit C remains a valuable screening tool that we use. And for policymakers, the regularity framework for alcohol-free products needs careful thought. So allowing these products to serve as vehicles for alcohol brand promotion through identical packaging, placement, and marketing undermines the intent of advertising restrictions. So you can't just use them as a tool to sell more of your products. Countries like Norway, which extend advertising bans to alcohol-free versions of alcoholic brands, offer one model. At a minimum, there should be clear distinctions between products that share branding with alcoholic drinks and those that don't. And for all of us consumers, remain skeptical of health marketing claims on any beverage, whether it contains alcohol or not. The fundamentals of healthy hydration haven't changed. Water remains the gold standard. Everything else, including the more sophisticated craft brewed, probiotic infused, celebrity endorsed beverage on the market, is supplementary at best. So remember, top of the hierarchy is water. Then you've got the sparkling waters and the kombuchas, the sugar-free or sweetened drinks. And at the bottom, you've got those sugary drinks and then an alcohol. So that's our explanation of the no-low landscape. I think the market will continue to grow, products will continue to improve. Hopefully the evidence base will continue to expand. And what we've seen today is that these beverages occupy a complicated space between genuine harm reduction tool and a commercial strategy. So understanding that complexity is the first step towards making informed choices, I think, both as individuals and as society. And I hope that's helpful for you in the choices that you make for you and your family. We'll catch you at the next one. Take care.